Welcome back to Kings of the North on Kings of Columbus. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis. We're running through the best of Northern football and the worst, because we're going to talk about Brian Ferentz later in the show. We're going to look ahead to another good Northern slate of games for week 3. We'll look ahead to that. We're going to rank, instead of Knights of the North, best players in the North, we're going to rank best coaches in the North, which means we are going to talk about Mel Tucker and Michigan State in that segment. We will have our team rankings, and we will talk about how many teams in the North would beat Bama. Because we have to do this, because I feel like, Landis, my definition of almost everything Ohio State has done in the last, 15 years has been accompanied by, would that beat Bama? So now that people are beating Bama, I think we have to acknowledge that, because you can't talk about beating Bama and then as soon as people are beating Bama, be like, beating Bama doesn't matter anymore.
Right. I think the target there has shifted, obviously, with who you're maybe most trying to beat now. But yeah, we like to throw a bone to people when they set a goal and then they accomplish it.
So later on this week, on our midweek Kings of Columbus, I really want to make a point about the blue bloods of the playoff era and how Ohio State fits into that. I think it is a valuable piece of context that Ohio State fans need to hear. But on this show, we're hitting all the Northern teams, and we're starting with our Frantic 14. That's 7 segments, 7 ideas in 14 minutes. Number 1 is this. The Big Ten West, Landis, they lost 3 big games last weekend. Wisconsin lost to Washington State. Nebraska lost to Colorado. Illinois lost to Kansas. Illinois was a 3.5-point underdog. They got down 34-7. Not good. Wisconsin was a 6-point favorite. Got down 24-6. Not good. Nebraska was getting only 2.5 points. They ended up losing 36-7. So got blown out. My question is, does the Big Ten West stink? Because Minnesota and Iowa are the only 2 undefeated teams left in the West. However, the Big Ten West has played 5 non-conference games against Power 5 teams, and the Big Ten East has only played 1. Penn State beat West Virginia. So we just ran down those things that I named. By the way, Iowa did beat Iowa State, and Purdue beat Virginia Tech this week. I don't know if the Big Ten West stinks, which is not a new story, or if we should give them credit for going out and playing real teams so far.
I am more inclined to give them credit for playing real teams. Like, stinks relative to what? Like, itself, probably not. Itself, historically, I don't think that's true. Relative to the East, compared to past seasons, probably. There's probably a wider gap there than there has been, sort of top to bottom. But part of that, too, I think, is like the context was wrong for some of those teams. Like, Nebraska should have been more than a 2.5-point underdog against Nebraska.
Easy cash.
Against Colorado. Nebraska is not very good. Some of the teams there are disappointing, right? I thought like Wisconsin might be a little more functional now than it is. I thought maybe Minnesota was sort of talking up its quarterback play coming into the season. I thought that would be a little more of a dynamic position for them. So maybe they're a little worse off than I thought they would be. But by and large, I think the West is mostly what I expected it to be. And I do think there are still interesting teams there with Iowa and Purdue and Illinois.
All right, number 2, Syracuse. Let's give a nod to Syracuse. 3rd in the nation right now in yards per game offensively, 587. Now it's Colgate and Western Michigan. I get it. But the last 4 years in total yards offensively, they rank 76th, 94th, 125th, and 71st in the nation. So even 2 games in, this isn't nothing. And by the way, why are we talking about this? I want to get people ready. On September 30th, Syracuse is going to beat Clemson. Last year, Syracuse started 6-0. They led Clemson 21-7 in week 7 and wound up losing that game 27-21 and went on a 5-game losing streak. They're real. Garrett Schrader, 3rd-year starter at quarterback, can run it and throw it, looks really good. They have 3 receivers with more than 150 receiving yards already this season. Umari Hatcher, Isaiah Jones, and Donovan Brown. They have dudes who can go up and get the ball and do something with it after they get it. And I just want people to be prepared. Since Syracuse joined the ACC, Syracuse is 1-9 against Clemson. The one win was in 2017 when the Clemson quarterback Kelly Bryant got hurt, and the College Football Playoff Committee all year talked about how like that loss basically didn't count, and they still made Clemson the number 1 seed, even though it lost to Syracuse, and then Clemson got steamrolled by Alabama. Remember all that?
Mm-hmm.
This one's going to count because Syracuse is going to beat Clemson, and I just want people to be ready. Are you riding with Q's?
I mean, they beat Colgate and maybe the worst team in the MAC. So I'm not quite there.
Well,
at least I'll say this. I am not I am not already on to Clemson because they have a more important and perhaps as difficult test in front of them this week.
We'll get to that and look ahead. Great Northern game this week. All right, number 3, Pitt-Cincinnati. The battle for the paddle wheel trophy. Officially, by the way, it is dead. We talked about it last week. They didn't do it. We knew that, like it's dead.
Yeah.
They had done it for years. They didn't do it. It's over.
Disappointing.
I thought that game was really good. I thought both defenses thumped each other. I thought Cincinnati especially. 8 tackles for loss in beating Pitt, 5 sacks. In 2 games, Ohio State has 9 tackles for loss as a point of reference. Cincinnati had 8 in that game. Shout out this. I like when this happens. Northern football. Corey Kiner, former Ohio Mr. Football running back, went to LSU, transferred back to Cincinnati last year, was okay last year, 81 carries for 362. This year already, 33 carries for 258, went 20 for 153 against Pitt. Real dude. He should be in the North. Welcome back, Corey Kiner. The quarterbacks didn't play great, but they made plays when they needed to. Emory Jones early for Cincinnati, Phil Dracovic late for Pitt. Pitt rallied when it looked like Cincinnati was mauling them. I thought both teams played well. Good Northern football, tip of the cap.
I thought Cincinnati's defensive front really got after it in this game. And I think that defensive line is pretty interesting, perhaps good enough to win them maybe a couple games that maybe they shouldn't down the road. You mentioned the sack production and tackles for loss. He also held Pitt to fewer than 3 yards per carry. Big time sack on 4th down as Pitt was driving to try to take the lead, I guess, at that point, to kind of end the game and ice it for Cincinnati. So Cincinnati's defense, perhaps a little better than we thought coming into the year.
I think it locked it in. You and I will be at Pitt-Cincinnati next year. We're leaning into, there's some great non-conference Northern football matchups. I love that they're happening, and I love when they do play each other, when they play good football. Number 4, Hudson Card, the Purdue quarterback, I think is the wild card of the West. I thought he played pretty well in a weird win against Virginia Tech. It was delayed by 6 hours or something for lightning. Terrible weather on the East Coast. Again, this is a guy, and I think Northern college football fans know this, but maybe not. Do you know this about Hudson Card? Do you know who he threw to his senior year of high school when he was a senior high school quarterback, who his leading receiver was?
Garrett Wilson.
He threw 50 touchdown passes as a senior. 19 of them were to Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson's 3 quarterbacks in high school at Lake Travis High School in Texas were Charlie Brewer as a sophomore, Matt Baldwin, one-time Ohio State. Well, he got to Ohio State as a junior, and then Hudson Card. Hudson Card goes to Texas, 22 games at Texas, 5 starts. Now he's at Purdue. I think he's got a little something, doesn't he? 23 of 34 for 248 versus Virginia Tech in a 24-17 win. They're not perfect. Devin Mockabee is a real dude at running back. I just think Hudson Card is probably the best quarterback in the West. And I think as maybe Purdue gets it together defensively a little bit, I think he's a guy who can make plays in November and maybe win Purdue some critical games. I don't want to overreact to a win over Virginia Tech, but I think he's a real dude, and I just want to remind people of it.
Yeah, I mean, he's the reason why I was kind of high on Purdue as a sneaky pick to win the West, because I guess it's a natural assumption when a guy sort of doesn't pan out at one place, you just think he's not that good. But he was a starter for Texas, got benched after one bad game for Casey Thompson, then was Quinn Ewers' backup. But by and large, when he played for Texas, he was not bad. He didn't blow people away, but he was efficient. I think it was 11-1 touchdown or interception ratio, or 11-2, something like that. So he didn't turn the ball over. Perhaps wasn't particularly explosive, but I think is a pretty athletic, smart quarterback, and that's kind of what you need to win in the Big Ten West. So I'm there with you. We'll see how it develops, but based off the quarterback play so far in that division, I think you could put him up there as the best. Certainly the best transfer, because Tanner Mordecai and Jeff Sims have not played very well. And
I mean, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but Q's Purdue on Saturday. We'll get to it more and look at it.
That's right.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Garrett Schrader versus Hudson Card. Strap in, baby. Number 5 in our Frantic 14, you want to get Rutgers to a bowl. Now, this is a switch for you, because you were all about Temple on our betting show this week, and that did not work out for you. Rutgers throttled Temple. Now you are looking to get Greg Schiano to a bowl.
Yeah, so which is a perfectly fine goal, I think, for a program like Rutgers, and one worth celebrating when they do it and are putting themselves putting themselves in position to chase it. So they're 2-0. They beat Northwestern handily. They beat Temple handily. They do have Virginia Tech this weekend at home. Virginia Tech has to come to Piscataway. I think they can probably win that game based off what we've seen from Virginia Tech. It's a toss-up at the very least. They play Wagner, so that's a third win on their schedule. Can they get the 3 more? Can they beat Virginia Tech at home? Can they beat Indiana on the road? Can they beat Michigan State in Piscataway, a Michigan State team that will probably have an interim head coach, and who knows what that roster might look like by that point? They play at Iowa, and they play Maryland at home to end the year. So I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but when you're looking to gauge success, I think at a place like Rutgers under Greg Schiano, the fact that they can, I think, realistically have this conversation to me suggests that they are going, going in the right direction.
When Greg Schiano got to Rutgers the first time around, didn't make a bowl the first 4 years, then made a bowl 6 of the last 7 years at Rutgers. The last 8 years, Rutgers has made 1 bowl, and that's because in 2021, Texas A&M backed out of their bowl because of COVID, and at 5-7, Rutgers got to go to a bowl, and then got throttled by Sam Hartman and Wake Forest and fell to 5-8. So they haven't really earned a bowl spot in 8 years, but they might be on track for that. All right, number 6 in our Frantic 14, I'm planting my flag. The end of this, we each plant a flag. Mine is this. Oregon State and Washington State are a combined 4-0 right now. Oregon State, I thought, looked really good. It was UC Davis. What are you going to do? But they, again, looked good in week 2. And Washington State got a big win over Wisconsin. Jake Dickert, really good coach at Washington State, right after the game on the field said, we're a Power 5 team. Like, I almost got like a little choked up about it. I want to give them this advice. Don't worry about it. Don't be Power 5. Go to the Mountain West, Oregon State and Washington State, and dominate. Be the new Boise State. Be the team, fight with each other to win the Mountain West, and be the team that makes the playoff with an automatic bid, and be the team that nobody wants to play in the 12-team playoff. Don't get stuck on labels. Play good football. In the history of the Pac-12, once upon a time the Pac-8, Oregon State and Washington State were in at the beginning on that. They've been around since 1916. Washington State has won the Pac-12, won that conference in 100 years plus 4 times. Oregon State won it 5 times. USC won it 37, Washington 17, UCLA 17, Stanford 15, Cal 14, Oregon 13. Those are the other original members of that conference, right? These are the 2 worst teams. So don't bemoan that it's dead. Celebrate that it's dead. Go be Boise State. Boise State, between 1999 and 2019 and 21 seasons, they won 10 plus games, 17 of 21 years. How fun is that? Oregon State in its history has won 10 plus games 3 times. Washington State in its history has won 10 plus games 5 times. Go be the new Boise of the Mountain West and win and celebrate and make the playoff that way. Don't get hung up on labels. Make the death of the Pac-12 work for you, not against you. Where are you planting your flag, Landis?
I'm going to plant my flag in Madison, Wisconsin. I have a trivia question for you. Do you know where Wisconsin ranked in the 2022 season in pace of play? Plays per second.
120th.
Close, 115th.
Okay.
This year, they're 34th. It's too much.
Too fast.
It's too fast. I think the offensive evolution that is happening there with Phil Longo as its offensive coordinator, I don't dismiss the idea just sort of generally as the right way to go. I think perhaps that Wisconsin is trying to go there too quickly and not maybe leaning into what are still the strengths of a roster that was built to run the football and do so effectively. Braylon Allen had 7 carries against Washington State. They threw the ball 40 times in that game, only ran it 29 times. And I get it. If you look at the stats, it wasn't a particularly efficient running day. So you got to figure out something, but I just don't know if the entirety of that roster, aside from Tanner Mordecai, who has played in that offense before, is quite ready to go as full bore into it as Wisconsin appears to want to do at this point in the season. So I'm curious if there's a recalibration there from Luke Fickell about maybe slowing the tempo a little bit, not playing quite as fast, giving his defense more of a chance, and maybe leaning on some of the more traditional stuff that has made Wisconsin a very good program for a very long time. There has to be some blend of ideas that happens there. I'm not dismissing that. And I think for Wisconsin to get over the top as a program that is truly competing in the postseason, it does need to throw the ball better than it has historically. But I don't think they need to get all that figured out in year 1 under Luke Fickell. And it does feel like to me they're trying a little too hard to do that right now. All
right. That's our Frantic 14, 7 topics to start our show. When we come back, on Kings of the North, on Kings of Columbus. Time to rank the best teams in the North. Landis and I will do that next after this. Doug Lesmerises back with Bill Landis. This is not just for Ohio State fans. If you're an Ohio State fan and you're here, awesome. You're great. Columbus is the capital of Northern football. But we, every Monday, Landis, are going to talk about more than just that. So we want Michigan fans. We want Penn State fans. We want Oregon fans. We want Washington fans. We want people to understand this. I think people are we're just starting this. Northern football culture in college football. Mm-hmm. Somebody sent me a tweet of a bunch of Southern college guys, like with pastel plaid shirts tucked into their khaki shorts with belts on, like walking it into a room.
Yeah, small inseam on those shorts too, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, short shorts.
Short shorts. And somebody was like, Southern football culture. And then somebody was like, Northern football culture is better than pastels and short shorts, right? So I don't know what our official uniform would be. It's not that. And that was an example of celebrating Northern football culture while simultaneously telling the South to cram it, which is what we want to do here.
I think can our like slogan be like Kings of the North : we're not wearing boat shoes?
All I want is the swag. All I want is the swag. And I want to wear that shirt. We're not wearing boat shoes.
Yeah, you can say it in your Batman voice. Yeah.
We're going to, hey, Southern guy, how are those boat shoes? Yeah, Batman's a Northern football fan. Okay, so we want, like, that's it. If you see little things, send them to us. Let us know. If you see little moments of Southern football culture that you're like, yeah, I don't want to be part of that, or Northern football culture that you want to celebrate, send them to us, and we'll bring them up here on the show. All right, let's rank the best Northern teams. Our rankings were almost identical this week. We rank whoever is worth ranking. We have 28 teams that we consider Northern teams. Last week we ranked 10. This week we're only ranking 9 because neither you nor I ranked Wisconsin. Sorry, Badgers, right?
Yeah, don't lose. And they were close to pulling it out. They had a untimely fumble there in the fourth quarter that, if they would have won, they would have been ranked. It was that simple, but they lost. Congrats
on not bailing after getting down early. So there's something to that. They did fight back, but also I think they have to adjust their plan. We also did not put in Washington State for beating Wisconsin. They're one of our teams. I briefly considered it, but not that much.
Yeah, I considered it too. The thing that was in my head was like maybe Wisconsin was not quite as good as we thought they were going into that game. Still a ton of credit to Washington State for winning that game, and for Jake Dickert for getting what I think actually is like a program defining win in the sense of telling you what you can be. But yeah, it just missed for me.
All right, so number 1 for us then. It's the Michigan Wolverines, just like last week. And J.J. McCarthy looks great. Mm-hmm. He was 17 of 18 in the first half. He completed his first 13 passes. They are in a world, and again, it's a lesser level of competition against UNLV, but that's not how the Ohio State passing game looked against Youngstown State. They're in like a play action world of play action, pocket, rip. That dude was ripping throws, and they are not an incredibly explosive offense right now. I like always checking in on explosive offensive plays. Passing plays of 30 yards or more this year, like the team we're going to get to very soon, Washington has 10. They lead the nation. Ohio State only has 3, which Ohio State needs to be more explosive. Michigan only has 2 of 30 yards or more. But they are the adjusted completion percentage for J.J. McCarthy as an individual quarterback in the Power 5 is 3rd in the Power 5. They're on point with everything, and they're getting pressure. Their defensive tackles are blowing people up. I just think they look great. And the thing that I'm cautioning some people against is they basically have had the same scores as Ohio State through 2 weeks. They've given up the same amount of points, and I think Michigan scored 1 more touchdown than Ohio State. It might be tempting to be like, oh, everyone's complaining about Ohio State. How come no one's complaining about against Michigan? If you've watched Michigan at all, that's why nobody's complaining about Michigan, because they look awesome.
Yeah, it's also baseline expectations, like, and fair or not, people expect more out of Ohio State's offense that they're not getting right now. Michigan has handled their games, have not played starters in the fourth quarter, have given up late scores in both those games that kept them from being shutouts. And JJ looks awesome. So I think that's it. I do want to ask you, any concern with you at the moment about how Michigan's running the ball?
No, because I think Blake Corum still has his moments, and I think they'll work it out. They have a new starting center, new starting right tackle. Their offensive line is still very experienced, and their coaching situation is jacked at the moment, right? Jim Harbaugh's not on the sideline, and I do think that has put and Sharon Moore wasn't there for the first week, the offensive coordinator. So I think they're doing a lot really right. And actually, I think there's going to be a world, this whole Harbaugh self-imposed suspension thing, it just gives a good team that is trying to elevate underdog motivation. They're going to ride that. So I think I'll attribute that to that. While they look really good in a lot of other facets, I think the precision of the run game will come around as they get all their coaches on the sideline. Are you concerned about it?
They're 53rd in the country in yards per carry. I don't really feel like when I watch them, I see that offensive line moving people quite the same way that they have the last 2 years. New pieces, I think, is a perfectly reasonable explanation for that. Just monitoring it. It's tough because they're not playing teams that I think they can really expose weaknesses of theirs. So they're just taking care of business and looking awesome. But I wonder about that. And I still have questions about the defense once they get on the field with for athletes, which isn't going to happen for a while.
All right, number 2 for both of us, Washington. Just like last week, they continue to just relentlessly attack people through the air. Nothing new in week 2, more of the same. But again, they lead the nation in pass plays of 30 yards or more with 10. They look great, and I think they can play with anybody.
Yeah, I mean, if they're going to throw the ball that efficiently, I think you're right. Again, all these teams have question marks still. It's so very early in the year. Washington running the football and stopping the run, I think, are the 2 things that I wonder about.
3 is Penn State for both of us. Dominated Delaware. But again, it's one of these things, Landis, right? That, okay, Delaware's an FCS team. Youngstown State's an FCS team. Was it 63-7 for Penn State? They dominated their opponent far more than Ohio State did. And if you're trying to go by stuff, that matters a little bit. And I do think their defense is really good. And Drew Aller, I said J.J. McCarthy is the is third in adjusted completion percentage among Power 5 quarterbacks. Drew Aller's second. But I just thought against an overmatched opponent, they overwhelmed them in a way that Ohio State didn't overwhelm Youngstown State.
Yeah, Penn State got 91 plays in that game, which is a whole.
Wasn't it
whole
91 to 41 or something in total plays? It was remarkable how many more plays Penn State ran than Delaware.
Yeah, they were. That's what happens when you get off the field as a defense against an overmatched opponent. That was partly what contributed to Ohio State having so few plays against Youngstown State, is it just gave up too many first downs. Nothing backbreaking, but just Youngstown State was on the field for a long time, and Delaware wasn't. So, and when Penn State had the ball, it basically scored every time it had it. So, what do you expect in a matchup like that? I don't think it's the end of the world if you're not firing on all cylinders in a game like that, but kudos to Penn State for showing up and doing it.
If we were doing tiers, would we draw a line here after the top 3?
Yes, I would. Yeah,
I would also.
Yeah.
But I'm glad to see that you've come aboard the Notre Dame train a little bit. You were waiting for them to prove it, and they proved it. They didn't dominate North Carolina State. Again, another weird weather game that got delayed for a while. I think it was 24-17 in the fourth quarter, and Notre Dame scored on touchdowns on its final 3 possessions. But I do think they showed what they can be. It wasn't perfect all the way around. That it's just some stuff. They came out. Oh, I wanted to ask you about this play in particular. They come out of
the weather delay. Yeah.
Yeah. And they put left tackle Joe Alt on the right side of the line.
Mm-hmm.
So, you noticed that? I feel like they didn't talk about it in the game. Did they talk about it on the broadcast?
No, they had no idea. Yeah, they won on balance, had both their tackles on the right side of the line so that their left tackle effectively was their tight end, and then they ran a counter play to that side. So Blake Fisher and Joe Alt just sort of caved in the right side of the offensive line. And then they brought the tight end and a guard, I think, around to lead block for Aldrich Estime, who I believe went untouched for an 80-yard touchdown.
So, yeah, the broadcast acted like, oh, wow, that was lucky. And it was no. They went in during a 90-minute lightning delay and decided this is what we're going to do on the first play when we come out. And they executed it to perfection with the strength of their team. And I thought that was like a moment to me. And then you add in Sam Hartman got going late when they needed to. And I just thought it was a good performance by Notre Dame. And I can't remember the guy's name. They have a number 8 on defense who's like running around. He's like playing the jack position, basically, that Ohio State can't find a way to implement. He's a rush end sometimes. He's like a middle linebacker sometimes. He's listed as their will linebacker, but he's a dude. I just thought Notre Dame looked not as consistently efficient as Penn State and Michigan look, but I thought they looked dangerous in moments. And when they lean into what they do best in areas is really good.
Maris Leafau is the guy that you're talking about. Yeah.
Everywhere.
So I moved Notre Dame up this week. I just kind of felt like it was time. Honestly, it was a little bit more about how Ohio State has been playing than it was how Notre Dame is playing. Ohio State just hasn't been impressive really in any regard.
Yep.
And Notre Dame has had flashes. They were very boom or bust in this game.
Yes.
I wanted to read this because I made a point of writing it down. At least I thought I did. Here it is. They got half of their offense on 4 big plays of 40 yards or more, and they averaged less than 4 yards per play otherwise. Now, it was terrible weather for at least half of that game. That would concern me, I guess, on one hand, but I guess the counter argument to that is Notre Dame has never really had this ability to be explosive. And if they can hit you for 4 plays of 40 yards, that probably makes them more dangerous than the opposite. So I thought that was noteworthy. NC State was really keying in on to stop the run in that game, and Notre Dame hit them with a couple play action passes on like tight end delays and tight end leaks. I didn't think there was a whole lot of Sam Hartman's got to make a bunch of plays for us to put points on the board in this game, but he did rip a few throws. He also got sacked 4 times. He fumbled twice. I think that's something to look out for, but
he holds the ball.
He does hold on to the ball a long time. And I'm still not terribly impressed by their receiver core. I don't know how many true difference makers they have on their defense, but they're solid for sure. And if I was going to sort of throw the gauntlet down and say, let's wait to see what it looks like when they play a Power 5 team. Well, they went on the road and they won comfortably. So shout out to them.
Colorado 5 rolled Nebraska at the end. Again, a game into the fourth quarter. Then I think Colorado's scored touchdowns on its final 3 possessions or something like that. Nebraska had a good defensive plan early. And I think some people early in that game were like, one hit wonder. Then it was like, nope. Now, Nebraska is incompetent at quarterback, and we can talk about that a little bit later.
Are they?
But Colorado worked it out. And I thought there were times last year when people were maybe frustrated with slow starts about Ohio State. And especially like the Penn State game was the example for me, where I gave Ohio State credit in that game because they worked it out and they had to grind a little bit to get there, but then they figured out a way to be explosive. And then at the end they were. I thought this Colorado game reminded me of that kind of thing that we've seen Ohio State do over time, that maybe somebody comes out with a good defensive game plan, but then you have a smart, talented quarterback, you have some playmakers, and you have a play caller who can figure it out. And so then by the end, it's not what was wrong, it's congratulations on getting there. And by the end, they blew them out. So I liked it from Colorado, even though it was a slow start.
It was a slow start. They were the beneficiary of some short fields early on, but then they did string some drives together in the second half of that game, which is good. Yeah, I agree with everything you've said. They averaged 1.8 yards per carry in that game, and they gave up 7 sacks. It'll be my question for them all year is will the offensive line ever jump up to bite them? So far it hasn't. I think they've done a good job of scheming around that and adjusting. But they're going to play teams with better athletes on defense here soon. And I do wonder what that will look like when that happens. But yeah, it was an impressive win for them because I was one of those people who was like, we were all wrong on Colorado. We got way too far out over our skis. And it's like, no, they look like a competent football team that makes adjustments and it pulls away from bad teams in the second half.
All right. Ohio State is 6 for us. Now, in the actual AP poll, Ohio State is 6 in the country, We have them 6th in the North because we watch football and react to what happens on the field. You did a whole rewatch show on our The Podcast feed. So what are you thinking of the Buckeyes right now upon a second look at week 2?
My overwhelming thought when I was talking with Berm and on that show was, and that was Monday's Podcast Daily. If you missed it, you can go check it out. That I felt a little better coming out of it, or at least I could see maybe the vision moving forward coming out of that game. If you're to believe that like Kyle McCord is a guy moving forward, you start building the offense around him. I did think the offensive line played better in that game, still not great, but better. Penalties were the bugaboo for them in that game, more so than I think that just like poor play as it was in the opener against Indiana. I am now questioning the defensive line, which is not a great place I think to be in at this stage of the season, but I feel pretty good about the secondary. I feel good about the linebackers. So I think they're okay. They're not hitting on everything right now. The offense has got to figure out third down. Like Ryan Day can complain about the limited amount of plays all he wants. It's their fault. They're not converting on third down. If they convert on third down, they have more plays. The defense has a hand in that. Like I said, they can get more stops or get stops quicker and get more possessions for Ohio State. They are averaging fewer possessions per game than they did last year. It's like 2 fewer possessions per game. So I'm not totally dismissive of the we don't have the ball as much stuff, but they can be much more efficient and productive on offense that they've been. And I think settling on a quarterback will help get them there sooner rather than later. But they've not been terribly impressive, as I said earlier. So that's why I bumped them down a little bit. Teams are more handling their business compared to Ohio State.
Yeah. I was talking about that adjusted completion percentage, which is I think it's a way to measure some like quarterback efficiency. Power 5 quarterbacks. As I said, Drew Aller is 2nd. JJ McCarthy is 3rd. Sam Hartman is 6th. Kyle McCord is 52nd. So, but they're also not getting explosive plays. So like in the passing game, they're neither efficient nor explosive, and they're not doing anything in the run game yet.
Yep.
So they're not doing anything exceptionally well on offense for a team that has been the best offensive team in the country in the Ryan Day era, right? I mean, that's like, who's the best offensive team in the country? Georgia's the best defense. Who's the best offense? Ohio State. That is not where we are at all. 2 weeks in. It's only 2 weeks in, but you have to acknowledge that. And like, whatever, I've been saying AP voters are idiots forever, even when I was one, because I at least I had a way I thought of why I went about it. It's insane. It's ridiculous that they're 6th in the country. And I know they dropped. They are not playing like a top 10 team. Doesn't mean They won't be, but like this is much more reflective of what they've looked like. 6th best team in the top half of the nation, not in the whole country. So pay attention. We have Utah 7, Oregon State 8, and Oregon 9. Is there anybody that particularly jumps out to you about that? Utah rallied to beat Baylor. Oregon State once again, overwhelmed an overmatched team, and Oregon got in a crazy shootout at Texas Tech, where I think Texas Tech is going to wind up being pretty good. They're 0-2 right now. So, like, credit to Oregon for that, but also, like, I don't know, that game could have gone either way. What do you think about those 3 teams?
Yeah, they're kind of all jumbled together for me. I think, like, when we were talking ceiling of all 3 of those teams, Oregon's is the highest. I think just by the nature of the way they recruit compared to the others. Oregon State's kind of rolling. They played San Jose State and UC Davis, so I don't think there's much to get into there with them other than like looking the way they should look in those games. Utah, I like they need to get healthy. Like I don't think they could keep doing this. And they lost Micah Bernard, I think, in that game too. So like it feels like every game they come out of it losing somebody important. The thought is they will eventually get like Cameron Rising back at quarterback, and that'll be a big deal for them, obviously. But they are very much the walking wounded, and I wonder when that might catch up to them if they don't get healthy soon. And Oregon, I think, Oregon went on the road and beat a Texas Tech team that I agree with you could be pretty decent this year. Tyler Shuck, their former quarterback, threw 3 picks in that game and kind of gifted them some opportunities there. So I'm still in wait and see mode with Oregon, but I think they deserve to be here. I just think like Utah doing what they've done, given their limitations, just sort of personnel wise, has been more impressive. And Oregon State just kind of thumping teams they're supposed to thump, I think, has been impressive.
If we did tiers, I think we draw a line. Michigan 1, Washington 2, Penn State 3. That's tier 1. Notre Dame 4, Colorado 5, Ohio State 6. That's tier 2.
Mm-hmm.
Utah 7, Oregon State 8, Oregon 9. That's tier 3. Agree?
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
All right. And then maybe Washington State will get in. So those are our rankings. So who would beat Bama? I think the Texas win over Bama was much more about bad Bama than great Texas. I think most of the country is now out over its skis on Texas is back. If you look at sort of like the little more granular stats of the game, success rate offensively, stop rate defensively, you were talking about like, hey, your whole offense was a couple of big plays. I feel like that was Texas. They got 10 free points off 2 terrible picks by Jalen Milroe, who is a very talented quarterback who everybody knew on that Alabama quarterback battle. The thing that would hold him back is he turns it over. He did it last year, and he did it again in this game. That's 10 free points. Texas didn't run the ball. Neither team ran the ball. Texas ran it 37 times at 2.8 yards per carry. Bama ran it 35 times at 3.1 yards per carry. Bama had 10 penalties for 90 yards. Texas converted a 4th down on a play where Quinn Ewers never even got the snap, and the running back picked it up and ran with it. And that was a key, 4th down conversion. I think people are nuts. I think the Texas Bama is not good. And by the way, Caden Proctor is like, hey, they got that guy from Iowa that Ohio State really would have liked. They are starting a freshman left tackle. He gave up 5 pressures in that game. That was terrible. In that game, Alabama's 2 tackles, Caden Proctor and J.C. Latham, according to PFF, gave up 8 pressures. The Texas tackles combined gave up 1. So they can't block. Their quarterback throws picks. Texas put the ball on the ground a couple times and didn't lose it. And Bama was still in it late. And Texas, like Xavier Worthy catches a miracle great bomb from Quinn Ewers. He also drops the touchdown pass that hits him in the hands. I think Texas loses 2 games this year. And I think the SEC West is there for the taking because that's LSU and Alabama. And I don't know how good either of them are going to be and who's going to win it. So we're going to beat Bama. But my point right now is that was bad Bama, not good Texas. And by the way, it's like, hey, we're the SEC. We got the new guy. The SEC is dead. Long live the SEC. Hey, if USC came in and steamrolled Ohio State, it wouldn't be like, hey, we're still great. It'd be like, man, Big Ten stinks. Can't believe they had to bring USC to knock.
Yeah.
Bama is in real trouble. Beyond quarterback. Real trouble. They can't recruit receivers. Their offensive line is starting a freshman. Their vaunted defense really didn't get after it that much. And Texas is not precise. Texas is not Florida State. Texas is not Washington. Texas is not Michigan. I think Texas is good. Texas is not great. Bama is immensely flawed. And I don't think that's the reaction this week.
It's not. No, it's definitely not. People want to crown Texas. Well, I think they're doing. It almost feels like there's 2 things. Like people want to celebrate the fact that Alabama is not very good, while simultaneously crowning Texas. And I don't think you can do both. I'm with you. Watching that game, I thought Sark had a good plan. He did the Sark stuff with the motions and the shifts and got guys in space, and they were productive as they needed to be in that game. I was unimpressed with Alabama on both lines. I thought that Alabama was going to have an advantage on the offensive and defensive lines in that game, and be able to kind of control things, or at the very least keep it competitive until the end to see what happens. I guess they still kept it competitive, but that takeover on both lines did not happen. I think Texas is pretty good up front on both sides of the ball. That is one takeaway I have from that. I'm paying more attention, I think, to Texas's defensive line in particular and what that could mean for them moving forward. But they're not precise. I don't think they're a finely tuned machine by any stretch. I think they're going to lose at least 1 game, perhaps 2 this year. And I've been on the 9-3 Bama train since the start of the year. So
really,
welcome with me.
Yeah,
I'm there. I might be on 7-5 now. But listen, this is one of the ones that's not like, well, just wait till Bama gets mad. They don't have enough good players. They don't have enough good veteran players. And again,
Caleb Downs. It would be great if Caleb Downs was at Ohio State. Ohio State really wanted him. They're starting a freshman at safety, and then he got sucked in on a route where he gave up something deep. He's a very talented player. He would help Ohio State. They're starting freshmen there. A couple different places. That's not how it's supposed to work in a place like Bama.
No, I think those guys will probably look much better by the end of the year, which is natural for true freshmen. But I just don't think there's enough to supplement that. Like, it's not the thing we talk about with Ohio State, like having veteran returning talent that's good and sprinkling young talent on top of that. I think Alabama has the guys to sprinkle, but not necessarily returning talent to kind of make it hum.
Yeah.
And now I think they're probably back to square one at quarterback too. Like Nick Saban said, he thought about making a change in that game from Jalen Milroe to I guess Tyler Buckner. They're gonna probably experiment with that. They do not have a good answer on their roster, and that's not a tremendous place to be in when you're playing in the SEC.
They have a true freshman, right? Dylan Lonergan, who I think, you read stuff down there, people seem to like. And then Julian Sands coming in, right? He's their next recruit.
They have two freshmen. They have Dylan Lonergan and Eli Holstein.
So they'll get it sorted out. This could be a transitional year for Alabama. It would remind me, again, Ohio State hasn't had it in a long time, but in 04 was a transitional year from Ohio State, from the 02-03 guys to the 05-06 guys. But in the meantime, they lost 4 games. So like that, it's hard to wrap your head around that. But as it's happening, we have to acknowledge it and not act like Texas is the best team in the country. So everybody chill out. Bama's not that good, and neither is Texas. Texas is good. Texas is not great. I've seen great college football teams so far this year. I don't think Texas is one of them. So let's play our favorite game show. Would That Beat Bama? Bill Landis, you're up on Would That Beat Bama? First up, the Michigan Wolverines. Would that beat Bama?
I think that would beat Bama. If Texas was able to control the line of scrimmage that way against Alabama, I certainly think Michigan is capable of doing so. And I think Michigan's passing attack is probably not as potentially explosive as Texas's is, but I do think it's probably like more efficient, more precise. And I just like nothing about Alabama on offense scares me. So like even if I have questions about how Michigan's offense or defense might look against better teams, I don't see a whole lot there to frighten me. So I like Michigan there.
Ding. That is correct. Next up, Washington. Would that beat Bama?
Yeah, that's fireworks, I think. That's Michael Penix dropping 6 touchdowns and no interceptions on you.
Ding. That is correct. 2 for 2. Next up, Penn State. Would that beat Bama?
Not as clear cut, I don't think. I have expressed my concerns about Penn State's defensive line and just like the lack of beef there, I think. Now they are bigger than they were last year, but I want some proof of concept, I think. So I would worry a little bit about Alabama actually being able to push Penn State around. But I think I would still take Penn State head-to-head there.
Oh, you pulled it out at the end because the correct answer is ding. Yes, Penn State would beat Bama. Mm-hmm. Let the Penn State edge guys go take care of those Alabama tackles and see what happens.
Yeah.
All right. Notre Dame. Would that beat Bama?
Yeah, probably. I don't, as unimpressed as I am by Alabama's offense, I probably feel similarly about Notre Dame's defense. So that would be an interesting matchup. But I think there's enough on Notre Dame's offensive line, probably on the outside, and Sam Hartman calling the shots so they could do it.
Ding. That is correct. That would beat Bama.
That is not a confident pick for me, but yes.
That's okay. Yeah. Hey, yes or no? It's a yes or no question. It's a yes or no game show. You're in the running to win it all. 4 for 4 so far. The Aflac reunion. Deion Sanders versus Nick Saban. Would Colorado beat Bama?
I think I'm probably a no.
Oh,
I think Shedeur Sanders might get sacked 15 times by Alabama.
I'm sorry about that. The correct answer was yes, that would beat Bama, which is why Deion Sanders should be the head coach at Auburn. I thought it all along. I first guessed that. It's like Colorado, what are we doing here? They're in the Aflac commercials. This should be happening in the SEC right now. And everybody would be betting on Deion Sanders Auburn to win the SEC West today if that was happening, because they would beat Bama. Finally, Ohio State. Would that beat Bama?
Yes. I have similar concerns about Ohio State's offensive line against Alabama as I do to Colorado. But I think almost everything else there is in Ohio State's favor.
That is correct. Ding! That would beat Bama. So 6 Northern teams would beat Bama. Bonus round, would you like to add anybody else from the North that might beat Bama? Would Washington State beat Bama? Anyone else?
No.
Okay. I was going to say it would let Kyle Whittingham go down there with his 4th stringers and see what happens.
Yeah.
But I think this is probably the top 2 tiers would beat Bama. When we come back, we'll be ranking Northern coaches, and we'll also give Landis his prize for successfully navigating Would That Beat Bama. We'll do it all next on Kings of the North on Kings of Columbus. Doug Lesmerises back with Bill Landis. Landis, we usually rank best Northern players here. We're doing Northern coaches instead, and we decided to do this before the Mel Tucker suspension, which is almost certainly going to be a firing, arose. We have to talk about this. Mel Tucker, former, Northeast Ohio native, played at Wisconsin, former Ohio State assistant, former Browns assistant. His 2 mentors in his coaching life are Nick Saban and Jim Tressel. Got a chance to be a head coach too late, I think, in life. Had 1 year at Colorado, then got lured away by Michigan State and got the huge contract after a really good year, 2 at Michigan State, 11 wins. And here we are. He has been suspended after admitting to having what he called phone sex with Brenda Tracy, who is a rape survivor who goes around and talks to college football teams to talk to young football athletes about like, hey, like this is what happens. Don't do this. Don't be this. And she said it was unwanted sexual advances by Mel Tucker. There's no dispute. They both agree that it happened, and he's going to lose his job. And it is a stunning fall. But if the facts as presented right now, there's been an investigation at Michigan State for months. It certainly do not look very good for Mel Tucker. What do you think of this whole situation?
Yeah, I think I guess we'll have to see if we ever get to the heart of the issue in terms of, there's 2 sides to it, I guess. But even regardless of that, like he should lose his job because that's just not the thing you should do when you're the head coach at a Power 5 football program. So he's out, and it makes me wonder where Michigan State goes from here, because it's a program built on the backs of transfers, and that has been successful in 1 year of Mel Tucker and not as much so in other years of his tenure. And I think that would lead me to believe that like there's a little bit of a rebuild that has to happen there, because when you bring in a lot of like hired guns, for lack of a better term, I think the thought is a lot of them are going to leave now that the guy who brought them in is not going to be there. So Michigan State, I think now is on the precipice of probably taking a little bit of a step back here as a program.
Michigan's good, which is not good for Michigan State. Mark D'Antonio took advantage to the utmost when Michigan was down. And so I think I agree. It's just when you think about what Michigan State and Northwestern football have been not so long ago, and what happened at both those programs with Pat Fitzgerald and now Mel Tucker, it is like the decision-making, right, of these incredibly highly paid, incredibly powerful people who are in charge of the lives of 100+ young men. And then you see, and again, just the facts that are known, right, and not in dispute would lead you to believe that there is poor decision-making happening, at the very least, from the people in power. And it is a reminder, again, for all of us. It is easy to deify college football head coaches. They are the only constant in a world where players move in and out. They are paid more than university presidents, but they are not infallible. And they prove it to us again and again. So I don't want to paint all college football coaches with a broad brush and be like, man, who knows what all of them are doing behind the scenes. But let's also make sure we don't paint them with the broad brush. It's like, hey, man, shaping young men. Oh, $8 million a year. They're all worth it. Like, there's some guys making terrible choices with immense money and immense power. And we all need to be careful. And so in this world where it can be very easy, I think, to doubt players or complain about NIL or not want to pay them or whatever, always remember that the guys who are getting paid, there are some of them who are screwing it up. Some we're going to find out about and some we're not. And so when you're making $1 million a year, millions and millions, he had a $90 million contract. You've got to be on point in every part of your life. And he used the power of the Michigan State football program. Brenda Tracy comes in, speaks to the team multiple times, and he used that power and influence to then do this in his personal life. And so it's like, oh, it happened. His guys using their position for things that are at the very least unwanted, but certainly seem even worse than that. So they're just people, man. They're just people. And so are the players. But I think we're much more apt to be like, hey, they're just guys. They're just 20 and 21 and 22-year-old young men. Whatever. They're not perfect. Neither are the 50-year-olds. Let's rank coaches. Again, almost unanimity for us. We ranked the top 15 coaches in Northern football based on like, hey, right now, build a program, win games this season. Who would you take? And we both take Jim Harbaugh. Is it just no doubt about it?
Did not think twice about it. Like there are two, or there actually I shouldn't say there are two. There are a couple, I think, like really good established top of their game program builders here. Jim Harbaugh is one of them, but also he's gotten his team like nearly to the mountaintop by making the college football playoff the last 2 years. So no, I did not hesitate.
It's a reminder, and I'm going to do research on this, but in the South, they think they care so much that they can't tolerate anybody not winning right away.
Mm-hmm.
They look at quick firings, I think, as a badge of honor. And there's a guy at the top of this list in Jim Harbaugh who maybe COVID helped him out, but maybe Michigan was kind of going to let it play out anyway. I mean, he wasn't awful. They had an awful year in the COVID year. But they were winning games, but not winning the most important games before that. But they did not have they didn't make a quick move, even when maybe I thought they should have, but plenty of people thought they should have. And look at the results. Look at the payoff. There's a guy who didn't quite make our list, but that we both voted for in our top 15, Dino Babers at Syracuse, who is like at a sort of a JV level compared to Michigan, the same thing. That guy had a great early, like year 3 or 4, won 10 games, then had like a 1-win year, but they did not pull the trigger on him. And now I think they had a really good start last. It's Syracuse football, but somehow you can't let the South take impatience as a badge of honor. And I don't think we in the North have to say, well, they wouldn't tolerate this at Tennessee. It's like, okay, do you want to be Tennessee? By the way, Tennessee's not going to be good this year. I knew that too. Tennessee's not going to be good this year. So I'm not saying that, but that doesn't mean go fire Josh Heupel. Like maybe let him work it out a little bit. So a nod. We're working it out. Kings of the North, we're working it out. Have a little patience. Have a little grace, man. Jim Harbaugh, number 1. Number 2, Kyle Whittingham from Utah. For both of us, why?
I mean, we had the conversation last week about what is Utah the best coach team in the country, and it's a worthwhile conversation, one that I think we probably could have had the last few years. Just consistency, like not the top level, I guess, production that you would expect from a coach who's this high on a list like this, but also like I think you have to remember the ceiling for a program like Utah as well, and I think that program has been operating at or near its ceiling for almost the entirety of his tenure.
They just find crazy ways to win, man. And if he ever was at a place where you could just stack talent in a different way, who knows what he would do. 3 is Ryan Day. It feels right. I don't know that I hesitated at all here. Again, I don't know how right now you could rank Ryan Day ahead of Jim Harbaugh, even though Ryan Day has made the playoff 3 out of 4 years. And then Kyle Whittingham is just a different kind of evaluation. I don't think you certainly can have Ryan Day any lower than this, but it's not my intention, and it's not what we're going to go into for a long period of time on this podcast right now. But when I said let guys work it out, it's just a reminder for anybody who's like, Ryan Day doesn't do this. Whatever. Right? I mean, you have a standard and you have expectations. It doesn't mean you can lose to your rival. But you can't look at Jim Harbaugh at the top of this list and not think to yourself, okay, well, is there a lesson to be learned there? So it's not a cop-out, and it's not letting Ryan Day off easy if Ohio State doesn't start to play better. But is there something that Ohio State fans or anybody evaluating Ryan Day should have in their back of their mind as they think about how Jim Harbaugh got the number one on a list like this?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm trying to remember, like, Jim Harbaugh, they're more or less kind of doing what they've always done on offense under Jim Harbaugh. I guess they're modernizing it a little bit with some of the quarterbacks are going after now. So that's a change. I don't know. I think Jim Harbaugh has been pretty on point with a lot of his assistant coaching hires, and maybe that's like a thing that you need
not early, but
the
second round.
The second round. Like, and Ryan Day, I think, is going through some similar stuff as a guy with far less experience than Jim Harbaugh, trying to figure out the right way to build a staff and trying to hit on a couple of things. And he probably does deserve, on one hand, a little bit of runway to try to figure that out. But I'll hear any argument to the contrary that says, like, Ohio State is not a place where you should get to figure that out. So it's tough. I agree with you. I don't think he should be any lower on this list than we have him. And depending on your criteria, he could probably be first or second. But I felt like third was right, just based off still some questions I have about him and his ability to get a program like Ohio State truly over the top.
Fourth is Deion Sanders. And this is one that is hard to wrap your arms around a little bit just because he's new. But he won at Jackson State. And the idea of what he has done, Colorado State is like another like prime time big network game this week. They cannot get enough of Deion Sanders. And that matters. When you're a place like Colorado, instantaneous credibility and interest is a thing. Mm-hmm. And then guess what? 2-0 and good hires and good motivation and players who know what they're supposed to do. Not a perfect team in year one, but I don't doubt Deion at 4 here at all. Don't doubt it at all. What's the case that he's too high? Like, what would be, like, why would, we're playing ADs. All right. We offered it to Harbaugh. He said no. Kyle Whittingham, Ryan Day said no. We're going to the next guy. We're going to Deion. Why is that wrong?
I don't know that that's inherently wrong. I saw your list and thought it was nuts that you had Deion ahead of Luke Fickell.
So, all right, let's have a conversation. Luke is 5. Deion's 4 for our combined list. Luke is, I think, going to be very good at Wisconsin. But I don't think Luke could do at Colorado what Deion has done in 2 weeks. Now, long-term, sustainable, I get it. But I'm not at all thinking that Deion Sanders, what he's doing, is not sustainable. I don't think that at all. So, out of the gate, explosion. And I do think I think Deion Sanders is now going to recruit like crazy because I think kids are going to want to be part of that. It is nothing against Luke Fickell, who made the playoff at Cincinnati, which is a stinking miracle and is a very good football coach. It is, if we're going to have a top tier of Harbaugh, Whittingham, Day, I'm putting Deion at the top of tier 2 because of the explosion, and he's rare. So it is It's nothing against Luke, but I would put Deion ahead of anybody who's hasn't made the playoff 3 out of 4 years, or who has not done this for 20 years like Kyle Whittingham, or who has not made the playoff the past 2 years like Jim Harbaugh. So it's all about Deion and nothing about Luke. But why did you have Luke ahead of Deion?
Just because I know that Luke knows how to build a program. And like, I think Deion does, but I know that Luke does. You make a good point about the recruiting. If you're going to tell me that Deion is going to now recruit high school players and build his roster in what I think is a more sustainable way than just farming the transfer portal every year, then I would think differently on his long-term projections there. If you're just rebuilding it through the transfer portal every year, I do not think that is a way to find sustained success. I think you're going to have like pretty major highs and lows when you do stuff like that. But that remains to be seen. And I guess I would give him the benefit of the doubt that he might do it the more traditional way and then supplement with transfers. I love Deion. I like culture coach. I setting the program standard, accountability. I think for a guy who's done what he's done in his football playing career is a big deal. They were good at Jackson State. You know, they had a tremendous talent advantage over a lot of the teams they played with. They were good there. I'm just like, I'm too much in wait and see mode to put him that high. I mean, I think I had him 5th, so like I'm not like, I'm not far off from you, but Luke has done it, and that meant a lot to me. So I put Luke 4th.
It is one of those, like, if you were just, and they're both first-year head coaches at Power 5 programs, and if you were in a room with the board of trustees and the school president and some donors and the AD, and you're like, okay, we want to be really good now and long term, our final 2 candidates are Deion Sanders and Luke Fickell. Man,
I think the answer to that greatly depends on where I'm at and what we've done and what we're trying to be.
I think if you are trying to do something that hasn't been done at your school, it's Deion Sanders.
Yeah.
I think if you're trying to raise your level, like Wisconsin's been good, but they want to be more than good, then I think it might be Luke Fickell. Because if you haven't ever really been much of anything, you'll roll the dice. And it's only a dice roll because Deion Sanders has not been doing it as long. That's the only dice roll to me. There's no other part of it that's a dice roll. But if you're like, well, we can't be terrible. Like, Luke's not going to be terrible. And I actually don't think Deion Sanders is going to be terrible. But it's just a smaller sample size. That's all.
Right.
I'd be hard-pressed to walk out of that room without hiring Deion, though. Okay. And I'm not going to apologize. Even if it's wrong, I'm not going to apologize because you can't do the same old thing. And I think Luke is probably the right guy for Wisconsin, but Deion Sanders was the right guy at Colorado. He also would have been the right guy at Auburn. Number 6 tie, Kalen DeBoer from Washington and James Franklin from Penn State. I think this is a reasonable tie. I think Kalen DeBoer, again, smaller sample size. I think people get down on James Franklin, but actually he's been pretty darn good there. And Northern football, if these are the guys who were tied for 6th as your best coaches, pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good. You had Kalen DeBoer, I think, much higher than I had him 8th. You had him 6th. Is that right?
That sounds right.
Yeah. So you're a little high. It's a smaller sample size of Kalen DeBoer. Like, he was good at Fresno State. Good early start here at Washington State. He is a national championship coach at a lower level of football, which I think matters. Just winning pedigree, ability to showing a process that can get you to that kind of place. So yeah, they're both good. I think people have legitimate questions about like James Franklin, the game day coach, which I do not dispute, but program builder, recruiter, culture setter, very good.
Kalen DeBoer, like Washington, I like the Jimmy Lake hire, right? Chris Peterson leaves. They hired Jimmy Lake, the defensive coordinator. Jimmy Lake was the defensive coordinator when we were covering Ohio State and Washington, that Rose Bowl in 2018. I just thought that guy, like, oh, that guy has it. Disaster.
Yep.
And then Kalen DeBoer flipped it immediately. So like that, like on like a game plan offensively, and it feels like he got guys to buy in right away. So I am very high on Kalen DeBoer.
He's also only 48 years old. Kalen
only
DeBoer.
48 years old. I like anybody younger than me. Marcus Freeman, 8th. I have no dispute with Marcus Freeman, and this might be low, and I think he was the guy Notre Dame had to hire. I think it has a chance to be great. He's just new.
Yeah, he's new. I think there's a lot of projection baked into that, right? And I have some questions about whether or not this was maybe too big of a job for him to take as his first job. Might he have been better off suited like going to Cincinnati to replace Luke Fickell there? Maybe, but I still think he's going to end up being a good coach. Again, I think he's going to recruit fairly well there. Notre Dame's, I think, natural recruiting ceiling might keep him from ever truly contending for national championships, but I do think he's a smart guy who knows what he's doing, and he's a pretty good defensive mind too.
9 is Jonathan Smith from Oregon State, who basically has rebuilt that program from nothing. And I think, I don't want a guy to not be able to move on, but he's a former quarterback at Oregon State, and I think he might be their head coach for 40 years, and everything on that campus will be named for him. And go be Chris Peterson at Boise State. Go crush. But there's a little Matt Campbell here, right? People still think Matt Campbell's a good football coach at Iowa State. They had a peak, and then right when it was like, oh my gosh, they're going to get over the top, they fell back. And now they're good. They're still overachieving for Iowa State, but Matt Campbell's not in our top 10 right now. So like the sustainability of like, is Oregon State won 10 games last year. They're going to win 10 again. They can win 10 again. Now, the one thing is, they got DJ Uiagalelei as a transfer. They got Aiden Childs out of Southern California as a freshman quarterback who played the whole second half against UC Davis. That was a huge commitment. and a huge recruit. So it's not only portal. They're actually building stuff there. I do think Jonathan Smith deserves to be in our top 10, but I think it's hard to gauge sometimes because he might be just as good of a coach. And 3 years from now, Oregon State might be 3-9 because it's hard to win 10 games at Oregon State every year.
Yeah, easier to win 10 games if you're in the Mountain West, I think, which is something that could keep him pretty high on these lists, I think. I agree with you. Like, if he stays there forever, he's going to build some kind of legacy. I do wonder who might come to try to lure him away, and if it seems likely that Oregon State's going to be playing true Power 5 football, will that be something that wants him to get to leave that job earlier than he would have otherwise? But I think he's a tremendous coach, has really built something sustainable there. And even if it's not 10 wins a year, if you're hovering between 7 to 10 wins a year at a place like Oregon State, that is wildly impressive to me.
Just missing our top 10, Dan Lanning at Oregon, Pat Narduzzi at Pitt, Brett Bielema at Illinois, because number 10 is Matt Rule at Nebraska. This is tough, but his first year at Temple in 2013, they were 2-10. 2 years later, they were 10-4. And then at Baylor, his first year in 2017, they were 1-11. 2 years later, they were 11-3. So year 3 for Matt Rule, he comes in and takes over a thing that is broken. And by year 3, they're great. So let's check back on Nebraska in 2025. But it's hard to ignore that pedigree, right? Which is why we have him at 10 on this list.
Yeah, I'd like the NFL stuff to not factor into this whatsoever for me. He does have a small-ish sample size as a college coach. I was looking at stuff. He's actually been a college coach for not as long as I thought he was. But man, like, winning double-digit games at Temple, it feels like borderline impossible.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have their own stadium. Their facilities stink. The school is in the middle of North Philly and like is just not the most desirable place to be. It is hard to get good football players there. It's even harder to win games. And the fact that he did it for back-to-back years there, winning 10 games is among the more impressive coaching feats I've seen. And then he went and was building Baylor, I think, in a similar fashion until he left. So he has made some decisions here at Nebraska that have, I think maybe he got a little too aggressive with his roster retool there. And they're going to be pretty awful this year. But I would bet on him finding a way to make that program better in the long run.
I saw a Nebraska writer tweet this during that game that Matt Rule has done a lot right at Nebraska, but he picked the wrong quarterback in the portal. And there's good portal quarterbacks available. And Jeff Sims, transfer from Georgia Tech, just has trouble not turning it over. And that just took Nebraska out of that Colorado game. And the result of that might be a bad record this year when there's actually some structural things at Nebraska that are working out. And so go recruit a quarterback and build it from within, and we'll check back in 2025. So our top 10 of our 28 Northern teams, our top 10 head coaches: Jim Harbaugh 1, Kyle Whittingham of Utah 2, Ryan Day 3, Deion Sanders 4, Luke Fickell 5, Kalen DeBoer of Washington and James Franklin of Penn State tied at 6, Marcus Freeman 8, Jonathan Smith at Oregon State 9, and Matt Rule at Nebraska 10. When we come back, I am mad. We started off just doing this thing like, hey, let's do like a little Brian Ferentz thing. I'm ticked. We'll do that next on Kings of Columbus, Kings of the North. So, Bill Landis, we'd like to check in, see how Brian Ferentz, the Iowa offensive coordinator, and son, it's not a coincidence that they have the same last name. They are related. Kirk Ferentz and Brian Ferentz, father and son, set a threshold. The AD, who's now like kind of not there anymore, said Brian Ferentz, the Iowa offense, not the Iowa offense, the Iowa team has to score 25 points a game and win 7 games this year. Brian Ferentz is going to be out of a job. So we're tracking that, and we're getting angry about it because it is a storyline. It is a storyline in college football. And Brock Heward, who was the analyst on the Iowa State game on Saturday, and I can't stop watching Iowa State. Excuse me. I can't stop watching Iowa. I'm going to watch every Iowa game live this year. If the ploy was, what if we did like a thing where like, it's like a kind of like a reality show, sort of like Survivor, but for a coach that like, if you don't score enough points, you're going to get fired. Do you think like the Iowa ratings should be through the roof? I can't stop, but I got super mad. I like Brock Heward. I think Brock Heward is one of the 5 best analysts in college football. I think he's really smart, soothing voice. Iowa is like backed up in its own end zone against Iowa State. They're like at the 5-yard line, and they run a double move play action with Cade McNamara, and the Iowa receiver beats his guy. Congratulations, you beat your guy. So Cade McNamara throws like a 50-yard bomb and slightly overthrows the guy. And Brock Huard's like, well, everybody talks about Brian Ferentz, and he's got to score 25 points a game. And Brian Ferentz called a great play there. He called the exact right play. And Cade McNamara missed the throw. Like, what's Brian Ferentz supposed to do? As if that never happens. It doesn't happen to any other offensive coordinator. And ignoring the fact that Iowa was doing nothing in the first half in a 10-0 game and scored a touchdown defensively on a pick six. So if we are going to victimize, well, we're not going to. We're going to stop right now. Brian Ferentz is not a victim. Iowa football fans are a victim of Brian Ferentz. And if we're going to have TV announcers go in and call Iowa games, hey, let's sit down with coaches on Friday. Hey, Brian, hey, this 25 points a game thing is really crazy, isn't it? You're doing a heck of a job. Bang up job, Brian. And then come out and blame players every time a receiver drops a pass or a quarterback overthrows a ball or a lineman misses a block, as if when you're an offensive coordinator, all you have to do, worked on paper. When I drew it up, it was good. By the way, he's also the quarterback's coach. Maybe teach your quarterback, don't overthrow the deep ball. I am infuriated by this. It's not the poor little Brian show. It's the unqualified for his job is finally being held accountable show. So if every time a player does something wrong on offense, we're going to point out that, well, Brian Ferentz called it up right. It's insulting. It's not what the game is about. Iowa did this to itself, but there's no reason the media and the guys on TV have to participate in it. He got free 7 points. They didn't say score 25 offensive points a game, Bry. They said score 25. Guess what they didn't do on Saturday? They didn't score 25, but they got 7 from the defense to get close. I was so mad, Landis. That's where we are. Oh, Brian Ferentz got a pay cut. Oh, Cade McNamara missed a deep ball. Brian Ferentz got fired. That's not what it's going to come down to. I guarantee that's not what's going to come down to. That one deep ball. Iowa did it to itself, but we don't have to encourage it.
No, it infuriates me that the defensive points count toward this total. Because they didn't hit it last week either. They didn't hit this week. They are trending toward the under. I want to read. I'm going to do this every week, I think. I want to read Iowa's drive chart.
Brought to you by, if you'd like to participate in the Brian Ferentz Survivor Show, you could sponsor the Bill Landis drive chart.
Okay, here we go. Open with a 7-play, 70-yard drive that stalls it at the 10. They get a field goal. Next drive, 8 plays, 80 yards, touchdown. 3 plays, -5 yards, punt. 3 plays, -3 yards, punt. 4 plays, 16 yards, interception. 3 plays, 1 yard, punt. Another sustained drive, 11 for 69 and a field goal. 3 plays, -3 yards, punt. 6 plays, 17 yards, punt. 3 plays, 9 yards, punt. 2 plays to run out the game.
They are averaging 22 points a game. That's tied for 104th in the nation. Of the 69 Power 5 teams, only 4 are averaging fewer points per game than Iowa. One of them is Iowa State, the team they beat on Saturday. Then it's Arizona State, and then 2 Big Ten West teams, Minnesota and Nebraska. So I think it's funny, but I don't think it's funny to call out players for not keeping Brian Ferentz employed.
Yep.
So we're not going to tolerate it. And this is a laughing stock. Iowa's great defense. Phil Parker's a great defensive coordinator. And frankly, like if Kirk Ferentz wasn't so old, he's won a lot of games at Iowa. He has. He's won a lot of games. The offense should be better than it is. There's no doubt about that. And it would be better if they didn't hire his kid. And it would be better if the Iowa athletic department had a backbone and enforced its own nepotism rules. But every time anybody on a broadcast or in a story or anywhere points out that there was a missed play or otherwise Brian Ferentz is off, we're going to light it on fire. On fire. Because that's not what this is about. This is about Brian Ferentz survival. And it's only on Brian Ferentz. And that means that sometimes guys miss throws, guys drop passes, but you still can score 25 points a game. I do find it slightly coincidental, I guess ironic, that they set this thing and then the clock rules happen and it's like, hey, we don't get enough plays. And Brian, like, you think Ryan Day's sweating the clock rules? Brian Ferentz is like, I need every play possible.
Yeah. Is that I wonder if there's loophole language in the contract that'll get him out of that because of the clock rules.
The whole Ferentz legacy is a loophole language. Brian Ferentz's entire employment is a loophole. His life is a loophole. We have gotten some nice reviews on the podcast. Well, some not so nice, but one of there's a unanimity in don't sing anymore. I almost started to sing "Life is a Loophole," but I'm not going to sing anymore because nobody wants to hear that, including you, right? You don't want to hear it.
Yeah, I could take it or leave it. Yeah.
All right, that's the end of the Brian Ferentz Survivor Show, and I'm glad that we started a silly little thing that now has my blood pressure up, but it's deservedly so. When we come back, we'll look ahead. Best games for week 3 in Northern football after this on Kings of the North on Kings of Columbus. All right, Landis, we're back. We appreciate everybody who joins us. For people who really love Ohio State football, and that's who a lot of the people are, we have a tech subscription service where you, I, Austin Ward, Jeremy Birmingham, we text things about Ohio State football. Comes right in your phone, and you can try it for 2 weeks for free. It's $6 a month after that. It's 20 cents a day. You did a little play of the week this week that I thought was really intriguing. You sort of put some squiggly arrows on a YouTube thing, which if you have the squiggly arrow app, I would like to use that at some point too. But what do you think of texting so far? Do you like doing it?
Yeah, it's fun. We have a lot of subscribers already, which is great, but it's, we're trying to stay on top of replying to people as much as we can. It's a challenge, but it's a good one.
Yeah. So if you want to join us, you can send a text to this number, 614-662-4509. You get back a link, you sign up. You do have to put in your credit card info. We're not trying to trick you, but you don't get charged until after 14 days. So on the 13th day, just type a text that says STOP, stop, and then you'll never be charged. And you will have gotten 2 weeks of free insight and analysis from us about Ohio State football. So if you want to try it, we'd love to have you. We're appreciative of everybody who's tried it so far. Let's look ahead to the most interesting Northern football games this week. And I'm going to start with a grudge match, and it makes me curious about whether Tom Allen doesn't like Jeff Brom. Tom Allen at Indiana and Jeff Brom at Purdue started their careers as a head coach the same year in 2017. They were both there for 6 years. Jeff Brom was 36-34 at Purdue. In that time, Tom Allen at Indiana was 30-39. So Purdue had the edge there. But more importantly, in the Old Oaken bucket, head-to-head, Jeff Brom was 4-1 against Tom Allen. They didn't play the COVID year. And the only loss was in double overtime. Jeff Brom's gone. He went back to Louisville, his alma mater. Everybody knew that was eventually going to happen. But now, Louisville's going to Bloomington. Noon on the Big Ten Network. Louisville's favored by 10. And there's isn't there a little juice here? It's Brom versus Allen. Doesn't get any bigger than that in Indiana.
Yeah, a little bit of juice. It's a regional rivalry, if you will. I think because Louisville is not too far from us as we consider our northern teams. They're right there.
They're on the edge.
They're right there on the line. Yeah, it's a fun matchup. I came away from the Ohio State Indiana game thinking, and this is not excuse making for Ohio State, that perhaps Indiana's defense might have a little something to it. Played Indiana State last week. We're going to learn a whole lot. Think we could learn a little bit about whether or not that is true this week against Louisville. And also, Ohio State offensive lineman Josh Fryer said that he thinks Indiana's a bowl team this year. So this is a game that Indiana needs to win if that's going to happen.
Was he paid by Tom Allen to say that?
He's a proud Hoosier at heart, man. He's from Indiana. He can't help himself.
Proud Hoosier at heart also makes me want to sing. Stop doing this to me. I want to make a whole playlist of Northern football songs. So maybe we should just do song titles. We could do that. Hitter in the hole, free hitter in the hole, Hoosier in my heart. What was the other one? We'll keep a list of song titles, but I'll promise I won't actually ever sing them. All right. This is one we already talked about. Syracuse at Purdue in the NBC primetime slot, 7:30 at night. Syracuse is favored by 2.5. And I don't even know how this game came about. I absolutely love it. Purdue actually does a pretty good job of playing like mid-tier national non-conference games, right? Like Virginia Tech this is exactly the kind of game that they should be playing. I think this is going to be really fun, and I don't know who's going to win.
Yeah, good. I think interesting quarterback matchup. I won't go as far as to say good because I think we need to see if we get the best versions of Hudson Card and Garrett Schrader, then I think it is a good quarterback game. Syracuse is a little injured. They lost an offensive lineman last week. Oronde Gatson, their excellent tight end, also got hurt in that game, was in a walking boot. He was on the receiving end of like a last second touchdown to win this game last year for Syracuse. So that is something to watch. And with a wide open Big Ten West, which I think is how we view it, you'd like to see Purdue, I think, show up here and look like a team that is perhaps capable of winning that side of the conference.
I didn't put it on our list, but Virginia Tech is now playing Rutgers, as we talked about. Like that, we'll get a sense of that was kind of a good win for Purdue, but also maybe Virginia Tech's terrible. So I don't know. Does it take some shine off the Purdue win if now Rutgers beats Virginia Tech?
Yeah, probably a little bit. I mean, Purdue went to Blacksburg and won, man. Like I don't. That's still pretty impressive, I think. It was bad weather there too, and they had a long delay, I think, as we mentioned earlier. But yeah, that would take some of the shine off of it, but also pump up Rutgers a little bit too, which I'm okay with.
Yeah, okay. Then we're not no shine removal. Pitt at West Virginia, backyard brawl. Always appreciate that. 7:30 on ABC. Basically a pick'em game. Pitt is favored by 1. This was a really good game last year, 38-31. Again, I love that West Virginia played Penn State. I love that Pitt played Cincinnati. And I love that the backyard brawl is back because it was gone for a while. It's back for this, I think, the second year of a 4-year term. Then I think they can take a little break and then play it again. These are teams that should play every year. I understand when you want to play some interesting non-conference games, you're not in the same conference, you can't do it. But West Virginia probably needs this. Neil Brown is probably on the hottest seat in the country, but this was a really good game last year. And again, I thought Pitt found a way to come back against Cincinnati. I think this could be good.
Yeah, I just think it's always a fun game, sort of regardless of state of the two teams. It would be, I don't think it's a job saver necessarily for Neil Brown if he wins this game, but I think it's pretty close to it. And if he loses, then I think those calls for his job get even louder. And frankly, I don't know, maybe if depending on if they lose and how they lose, I think, maybe he's not coaching West Virginia next week after that. So it'll be fun. I'm glad that Pitt and West Virginia can find a way to play each other. I wish Pitt and Penn State would find a way to play each other more.
You know who my secret next coach at West Virginia is, right?
No, I don't.
Nick Saban goes home. Like final hurrah. Like people like us are on her being like, no way could Bama beat Colorado. And Saban goes 9-3. He's like, I'm out. And then West Virginia fires Neil Brown, and they're like, Nick, he's from West Virginia. Nick, come home. And in his final hurrah, he goes back and rebuilds West Virginia football into something it hasn't been since Don Nehlen. And it just brings a tear to everybody's eye. You in?
It doesn't matter whether or not I'm in. It matters whether or not Miss Terry's in. And I don't know if she would be.
They can have the nicest. They could live like in the Dirty Dancing Lodge in West Virginia or something, right? They can build them a house. They'll figure it out. Yeah. So get ready for that. Syracuse is going to beat Clemson, and Nick Saban is going to be West Virginia's coach next year. Minnesota at North Carolina. In PJ Fleck's tenure at Minnesota, they've only played 3 non-conference games against Power 5 teams. 2 of them were against Colorado the last 2 years. And Colorado was 1-11 and 4-8 in the 2 years it played them. And one was in 2017 against Oregon State, right when Jonathan Smith was getting started. And Oregon State was 1-11 that year. So PJ Fleck is 15-1 at Minnesota in non-conference games. They lost to Bowling Green one year, but they haven't played anybody, right? Mm-hmm. Minnesota at North Carolina. This is Drake May. This is North Carolina. Now, who almost lost to App State, but still, it's Drake May who's going to be like the 3rd pick in the draft. On ESPN at 3:30, Minnesota's getting 6.5. Huge. This would be gigantic. I know PJ Fleck has the win over Penn State the year that Minnesota was like a top 10 team. They haven't done something like this. This would be great for the Big Ten, great for Northern football, great for Minnesota, great for PJ Fleck. Can they do it?
Can they do it? I am skeptical of their ability to score enough points to do it. That offense is pretty bad. 13 points against Nebraska, 25 points last week. The defense might be legit. And as it is most years, I think under PJ Fleck, their defense is usually pretty good. How much of that is playing Big Ten West teams all the time, and how much of it is a reflection of their actual talent? Fair question. I don't know the answer to that. I think we'll get that answer this week. North Carolina is not a particularly impressive team, but they do have a quarterback who is, who could very well be the first pick of the NFL draft, and the ability to be explosive, certainly. So if Minnesota limits that offense in a way that makes this game like even kind of competitive, I think I'd be pretty impressed by that.
All right, last one on our list, Penn State at Illinois, noon on Fox. Penn State favored by 15.5. At the beginning of the season, I circled this game as like, okay, like before Penn State sort of gets into the meat of stuff. All right, Illinois, week 3, it's a Big Ten game. But Illinois didn't know what to do with Jalen Daniels against Kansas last week. As the ship sailed on, Illinois could throw a monkey wrench into Penn State's possible playoff season.
I think it has. Really, the only thing I'm kind of interested in here is Penn State's offensive line against Illinois' defensive line, and mostly the interior of both and how that goes. But Illinois is probably a few degrees worse than I thought they were going to be this year.
Yeah. All right. So that's our look ahead. We'll always do that every week on Kings of the North on Kings of Columbus, let you know what's coming up. We'll always do Brian Ferentz unless we break it out into its own special show, which we might do that. We'll rank the teams. We'll usually rank the best players. We did the coaches this week. There'll be some weeks. We think of it like this, Landis. Knights of the North, the players, that's our Northern Heisman. So This was like our Northern Coach of the Year award, like the Bobby Dodd, whatever. There's a million. Eddie Robinson's a good one. There's a million different coaching award. But we might also do the Bolitnikoff of the North, which we'll rank the best receivers, or the Doak Walker of the North, and we'll rank the best running backs, or rank the best defensive backs, or rank the best edge rushers, or something. We'll mix it up a little bit. We'll still do the players a decent chunk of the time, but if it's just being it's still Blake Corum, it's still Michael Penix, it's still Marvin Harrison Jr., then maybe we'll take a break and do some other stuff. Anything else we want to tell the good people about as we continue to navigate this new world of Northern football talk?
If you know a good place for us to rent a barge for next year's Pitt-Cincinnati game, we're all ears. No, I think, we're just trying to get people used to this. I do like mixing it up with the player rankings, because this was a week where there probably would not have been a bunch of movement. But we got some big games coming up that I think will create some movement. So I'm excited about it.
All right. We will catch our Ohio State listeners on Kings of Columbus later this week. We have our betting show at the end of the week. And again, all are invited post-game show. We do that right after the Ohio State game. We want to be part of your Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, whenever Ohio State is done. So make that part of your regular week. But for now, we're so grateful that you're here. We're enjoying what we're trying out here. If you want to drop a review, we read the good ones. We read the bad ones. We just appreciate you guys interacting with us. We want to create a community. We want to create a culture. We want to create context. We want to highlight the best of Northern football, and we want to call out Northern football when it's not meeting its own standard. So if you have suggestions on how we can do that better, you can find us on Twitter. Our tech subscribers can always fire away with things about that. And we'll continue, I think, Landis, to build ways to enhance this community and let people be more part of it in an even greater way. So for now, he's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North on Kings of Columbus.